What's up, F Block Dark Days? This is Kevin DeGray. I'm a senior in B Block Dark Days, and this is my presentation on Dracula Chapters 5 and 6. We'll start off with a quick summary of Chapter 5. This chapter includes a series of letters and a diary entry that provides insights into the lives of Mina Murray and Lucy Westrania, who are two women in England. Mina writes to Lucy, sharing her excitement about her fiancé, Jonathan Harker's impending return. Harker is obviously the character who has perspective in the first 4 chapters. Lucy replies, discussing her own romantic life. She has received marriage proposals from 3 separate men: Dr. John Seward, director of a London lunatic asylum, Quincy Morris, who's a wealthy American, and Arthur Holmwood, whom she loves and has accepted as her fiancé. Dr. Seward is disappointed by Lucy's rejection and focuses on his work and records an entry about his unusual new patient, Renfield, who exhibits strange behavior. This is the second perspective character we get in this chapter. Finally, Quincy Morris congratulates Arthur Holmwood on his engagement to Lucy, taking the news much better than Dr. Seward does. In Chapter 6, Mina writes in her journal about visiting Lucy in Whitby, which is a scenic town on England's northeast coast, known for its haunted abbey ruins. An elderly local, known as Mr. Swales, befriends the woman and dismisses the town's ghost stories, mentioning that many graves in the churchyard are actually empty due to sea-related deaths. Mina worries as she has not heard from Jonathan in over a month, adding to her growing anxieties about him. All the while, Dr. Seward is continuing to document Renfield's behavior, noting that the patient has a bizarre practice of consuming living creatures in a food chain fashion. Flies feed spiders, spiders feed sparrows, and he believes that eating these bugs and animals gives him strength. Seward classifies Renfield as a zoophagous maniac who claims to absorb the lives of others. Mina observes Lucy's new habit of sleepwalking and detects a troubling change in her friend's demeanor. While walking, Mina meets Mr. Swales again, who shares his view on mortality. At this point, he predicts his own impending death without fear. The chapter closes with the setting of a mysterious, seemingly unmanned ship off the coast, which Mr. Swales believes to be Russian, and assures to Mina that we will hear more about this ship. Moving on to my reaction and analysis. First off, we're going to look at the contrast between Mina, Lucy, and the eerie tone of Dracula's opening chapters. Mina and Lucy are introduced in these chapters, and they seem to be pretty ordinary, and they're almost kind of boring characters, kind of one-dimensional. They're especially boring compared to the dark, horrifying atmosphere of Dracula's world. They kind of feel calm, organized, and they seem really human compared to what we saw earlier, which sets up a whole new setting for us. Their setting in England is a world of order that starkly contrasts with the chaos and the horror that we've encountered in Dracula's mansion. Mina and Lucy's world almost acts as a foil to Dracula's, giving us a sense of stability in the story. But there's also underlying tension because this life doesn't feel like it can continue with Dracula's presence in the story. The other new characters, like Lucy's suitors, don't seem to add a lot of depth to the story. They also seem kind of one-dimensional and basic. However, all the elements, the simple characters and the calm tone, they seem to be done purposefully by Stoker, crafting a clash between the two very different worlds in the upcoming chapters. Now we're going to look at the two more outstanding characters for me in these chapters, which were Mr. Swales and Renfield. First off, Mr. Swales was my favorite character in this section. His unique voice provides some comic relief, which was needed in these chapters. And he also challenges the local superstitions with his skepticism. His no-nonsense attitude makes him feel real and grounded, and he especially feels real and needed in a story that feels so supernatural. Then we had Renfield, who got introduced, who was really a fascinating character who seemed to echo the elements of Count Dracula himself. There's something really unsettling about reading about Renfield. His motivations are tough to understand, and he seems drawn to Dracula in strange ways, which he really just mirrors the actions of the Count that we saw in the first four chapters. Both characters, in their own way, add layers to the story and hint at the tension between uh, the rational real world and the unknown supernatural elements. Here I attached a uh, passage from the Mr. Swale's dialogue. It really develops Swale's voice by showcasing his blunt, no nonsense attitude and how he really just has no care for superstition. Moving on to the gothic elements in these two chapters, I decided to discuss the psychological distress that a lot of the characters seem to undergo. The most obvious one to me was Dr. Seward. Uh, Also Mina too, but more Dr. Seward. They're each affected in unique ways, and their distress begins to deepen the novel's dark, unsettling tone. Dr. Seward's emotional turmoil really followed after Lucy rejected him. He becomes like almost obsessive about studying Renfield, which is his work. Renfield, who we discussed earlier, the unusual patient with the bizarre behavior. Uh, this close exposure to Renfield's strange habits seem to only add to Seward's emotional strain, and it hints at a deterioration in his mental stability as this book moves on. Meanwhile, Mina experiences her own anxiety and distress. She's troubled about Lucy's sleepwalking, and probably even more so by the absence of her fiance Harker. Together, these worries unsettle her mentally and place her on edge, making her more vulnerable to the eerie events that are clear to unfold later on. Through both characters, Stoker uses psychological distress to heighten the gothic atmosphere, foreshadowing the unsettling events Dracula's presence will have on them and their world as a whole as we continue to move forward. Moving on to my final slide, discussing one of the gothic questions. What does the narrative suggest about the nature of the human mind? Well, the passage from Dracula suggests that the human mind is both easily disturbed and emotionally fragile, and it's often mesmerized by strange or unsettling occurrences. We see this through Mina's growing distress over Lucy's sleepwalking and Jonathan's absence. The uncertainty and the lack of answers for her just really are seem to be taking a toll on her mental state, showing how the mind can be easily unsettled by things beyond control. Furthermore, Dr. Seward's obsessive focus on Renfield also emphasizes the mind's tendency to become fascinated by the disturbing and the unnatural. Instead of being repelled by this bizarre behavior, he's drawn to it, suggesting that the mind can be captivated by the strange, especially when it challenges reality. Finally, Seward's emotional fragility is also evident in his reaction to Lucy's rejection. His coping mechanism is throwing himself back into work, and it shows how the mind often needs distraction to deal with emotional distress. Rather than fully confronting his feelings, he dives into the study of Renfield, indicating the mind's need to escape from vulnerability or pain, often by diving into one's work. That was my analysis of chapters 5 and 6. Thanks for listening.